Good evening. This is Forum Daily for Wednesday, July 13th. I'm Julie Stautland filling in for Nima Rajan. The Bank of Canada is making an aggressive move to try to rein in skyrocketing inflation and has boosted its key interest rate by a full percentage point to 2.5%. It's the largest single hike since August of 1998. Economists have anticipated a rate hike of 3/4 of a point and believe this signals that the central bank could raise the rate to a peak of 3.25%. The Bank of Canada says the largest drivers of global inflation are the Russian invasion of Ukraine and ongoing supply disruptions, which are leading to higher global energy and food prices. The federal government has reached a deal with an Eastern Ontario company to supply materials for 1 million electric vehicles per year. Global Materials Technology and Recycling Group, Umicore, is going to build a new battery facility in Loyalist Township. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the new plant will create 1,000 jobs while it is being built and hundreds of long-term positions once it is up and running. Rogers is going to give its customers credits equal to 5 days of service. This as a first step toward compensating them for the massive outage that crippled its network last week. It says it has been listening to just how significant the outage was that left wireless and internet customers without service starting early Friday morning. The outage also affected 911 services, financial networks, and other critical services, and has prompted the federal regulator to ask for a detailed explanation by July 22nd. Canadian food suppliers are once again telling grocery stores of upcoming price hikes. The letters from dairy producers Lactalis, Arla Foods, and Saputo signal more price increases will hit grocery stores this fall. In some cases, the higher prices are due to the Canadian Dairy Commission's approval of a second milk price increase for this year. Farm gate milk prices are set to go up about 2 cents per litre or 2.5% on September 1st. Real estate brokerage firm Royal LePage is cutting its expectations for the growth in home prices this year and is now predicting that prices will rise just 5%. That's down from its April estimate of a 15% jump in prices. Royal LePage lowered its forecast in light of news that the Bank of Canada would be making more aggressive than expected interest rate hikes. It is still predicting home prices will end the year higher than last year. Canada's premiers expressed frustration that a date has yet to be set for a meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, focused on health care as they wrapped talks in Victoria, BC. The 13 premiers want to chart a path forward for working with the federal government on funding the modernization of a health system plagued by severe staffing shortages. Several premiers expressed frustration that Federal Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc had discussed issues related to the request that Ottawa increase its share of healthcare funding in the media without sitting down with them. Starting tomorrow, all Ontario adults will be eligible for a 4th dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. The shots are being offered to anyone who had their first booster dose 5 months ago. Ontario is seeing a summer wave of infections, and officials have been under pressure to expand eligibility for 4th doses beyond people aged 60 and older, immunocompromised people, and Indigenous adults. More Canadians are living alone than at any point in the country's history. The latest census shows 4.4 million people lived alone last year, up from 1.7 million in 1981. The number of households where roommates lived together soared 54% between 2001 and 2021. And the number of homes being shared by multiple generations of a family, 2 or more families, or a family living with others has shot up by 45% over the last 20 years. New numbers from the RCMP show that Manitoba has the highest vacancy rate for Mounties in the country. The RCMP's national headquarters says Manitoba's vacancy rate was at 6% last year, which equals around 60 positions. Canada's average is 4.3%. Municipalities in the province say the high vacancy rates are creating concerns about response times and rising crime. After weeks of delays and backlogs, Toronto Pearson Airport is launching a digital tool. It is designed to give passengers information on every step of their journey, from check-in and security to customs and baggage claim. CEO Deborah Flint says the aim is to reduce passenger anxiety about what to expect when they travel. We'll be right back. A new mutation of the virus that causes COVID-19 is spreading around the world. Scientists say the latest Omicron variant, designated BA.275, may be able to spread more rapidly and get around immunity. It's unclear whether it could cause more serious disease than the currently dominant variant known as BA.5, but scientists are concerned that it's already been detected across India and in the US, UK, and Canada, among other countries. Joining us now to take a deeper look at the new variant is Dr. Abhiskek Raut, Medical Director at Appletree Medical Group. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
What do we know about the spread of the new Omicron mutation dubbed BA.275?
Well, the BA.275 variant, nicknamed Centaurus, was first detected in India around early May. Cases have still risen quite sharply in the UK, apparently faster than when we saw the transmissible BA.5 variant, which is also present in India. And what we're finding is 275 is actually displacing the previously dominant BA.2 variant in many of the countries. So we've seen now 275 detected in almost 10 other countries, including the UK, the United States, Australia, Germany, and here in Canada. The European Center for Disease Prevention and Control calls it a variant under monitoring, which means we're still concerned that it could transmit more severe disease or just transmit faster.
What makes this variant different from others? Is that one of the things?
That's right. So early studies show that it might be able to dodge immunity a bit better than the parent BA.2, which means if you had COVID BA.2, you may still be susceptible to catching it again, as if it were the first time around. We also see that the BA.275 has extra spike protein mutations, and these are the nodules on the surface that makes it harder to catch.
So does this potentially make it more dangerous than other variants?
I think so. There is some concern about that. So far, the evidence is showing that we have mild disease, but it's still early days. At this moment, we're not seeing a huge correlation between the new strain and the rate of hospitalization. That still remains low, but we do have to keep following this here.
How can viewers protect themselves and loved ones from this new variant?
I think masks are one of the most important strategies here, but also staying safe by simple precautions, physical distancing, keeping rooms ventilated, avoiding crowds, and of course, vaccinating would be the strongest one to decrease the morbidity and the mortality of COVID-19.
Right. Ontario announced that it is expanding eligibility for 4th doses of COVID-19 vaccine to all adults starting Thursday. How is COVID-19 vaccination proceeding across Canada?
Well, in Canada, we've had about 86 million doses administered. 90% eligible Canadians have received at least one dose of it. 86% are fully vaccinated, in fact, and about 50% are fully vaccinated with a third dose. Comparing it with countries like the United States, that last figure is closer to 31%.
We have been hearing of new variants for some time now. What causes a virus to mutate in the first place?
Well, what happens is a virus can have DNA or RNA. Once it invades a host or a human or an animal, it causes replication to occur. But that replication can have errors. And with those errors, you start seeing these small mutations that surge up. And of course, there's so much replication occurring that you see a lot of errors happening with time. Some of them cause significant change. A lot of them do not.
Should viewers expect further mutations as time goes on?
I think so. We likely will see a lot of different mutations, but keep in mind, most of the mutations don't do too much. It's only the variants of concern that we're particularly worried about there.
So what are we watching for as we learn more about the BA.275 mutation?
Well, December 10th, 2021, we had about 3,000 cases in Canada. By January 10th, we had closer to 60,000 cases, so 20 times more. So what we're watching for is that exponential, explosive jump in cases, and also looking for hospitalization rates to see how dangerous this variant can be.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much. Take care.
After the break, a look at Canada's public health system in crisis. We will speak with Pauline Worsfold, Secretary-Treasurer at the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions. She will help unpack staffing shortages, forced overtime, and canceled vacations, and what her organization is asking from Ottawa and provincial governments. So stay tuned to Forum Daily. We'll be back with more on that and news from around the world after the break. Stay with us. Canadian nursing leaders say they've sent a message to the premiers during their meeting in Victoria, BC this week that patients and nurses are suffering through a dire staffing crisis that threatens the sustainability of public health care. A statement from Linda Silas, president of the Canadian Federation of Nurses, says the system is on the brink of disaster, and nursing leaders shared proposed solutions with Canada's premiers. Ms. Silas says nurses have been struggling through extreme staffing shortages, forced overtime, and canceled vacations. With no end in sight to untenable conditions, the CFNU says its proposals focus on retaining nurses, encouraging them to return to the profession and the public healthcare system, and new measures to recruit and train the next generation. Joining us to discuss the current state of Canada's public health care is Pauline Worsfold, Secretary-Treasurer at the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions. Welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me.
Can you start by giving us a brief overview of the situation currently facing public health care in Canada?
Well, you did a good preemptive description there when you said it's the working conditions are untenable. Nurses are working huge amounts of overtime, including 24-hour shifts in some provinces. There are just no nurses to replace the current nurses who are on shift. Huge amounts of overtime, not being able to take time off to rest and recover. And the system, the people within the system are broken.
What are the main causes for these staffing shortages, do you think?
Well, this is not new, I have to say. We've been sounding the alarm for the past 10 years that we had a nursing shortage over the last 10 years. And of course, the pandemic has only made it worse. It's, magnified the problem, and it's staff shortages related to cutbacks over the previous 10 years. Regarding financial cutbacks, beds in the system have been cut back, so therefore patients face longer wait times, and it's not new.
How has the pandemic impacted the healthcare system staffing situation across the country? You mentioned a couple things. Is there any more than that?
Well, it's made it worse. The pandemic has made it worse because not only do the staff unfortunately contact COVID, but so do their family members. And then that takes them away from work because you can't come to work if you're sick. And so that plus the burnout. We have nurses that we had a survey done earlier this year that showed 50% of nurses were looking at leaving their current job, and 20% of that 50% were considering leaving nursing altogether.
In that line, what will the public healthcare system look like in a year or so if nothing changes?
Well, that's not an option. Something has to change. And coming out of the Premier's meeting, we need action, and we need action right away. We want the federal government and the provincial and territorial governments to work collaboratively to come up with solutions to fix the problem. And we offered solutions in the public system too, I must add. There is no room for a parallel private system. It would just siphon resources, human resources and financial resources away from the public system. So there's no room for a private for-profit system in this country at this time.
So what is your organization urging governments to do to address the situation?
We're encouraging all levels of government, provincial, territorial, and the federal government to come together and listen to the nurses. We have solutions. We're looking at our 3 R's: retaining, re-entry, and recruiting. And I would add a 4th R: you have to do it with respect. And if you can retain the nurses that are in the system, how you're going to do that is you're going to fix the working conditions. The workloads are unbelievable. And the conditions of work are the conditions of care. And our nurses are at the breaking point, and some of them have broken and have left.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
News from around the world next. The U.S. president begins a trip to the Middle East. Russian and Ukrainian military officials meet, and Sri Lanka's president flees the country. Stay tuned. U.S. President Joe Biden landed in Tel Aviv to start a whirlwind 4-day trip to the Middle East. While in Israel, he will be briefed on the country's Iron Dome and Iron Beam air defense systems, and laid a wreath in Jerusalem at Yad Vashem, Israel's memorial to Holocaust victims. He also plans to meet the Palestinian president on Friday in the West Bank before heading to Saudi Arabia. Military officials from Russia and Ukraine met today for their first face-to-face talks in months. This to discuss a United Nations plan for getting blocked Ukrainian grain to world markets through the Black Sea. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba says grain exports won't resume without security guarantees for ship owners, cargo owners, and Ukraine as an independent nation. He doesn't think peace talks will happen anytime soon. Inflation hit a 40-year high in the U.S. last month, fueled by surging prices for gas, food, and rent. Consumer prices soared 9.1%, up from an 8.6% jump in May. The increase is putting even more pressure on households and likely seals the case for another large interest rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve, with higher borrowing costs to follow. Sri Lanka's president fled the country this morning. Before his departure, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was the last of 6 members of the country's most influential family, still clinging to power. He won the presidential election in 2019, vowing to lead the country out of an economic slump. Instead, he made a series of fatal mistakes that ushered in an unprecedented crisis that led to severe shortages of food and fuel. Sri Lankan protesters, angry over the economic chaos, have stormed the Prime Minister's office, demanding he resign. 2 candidates have been knocked out of the race to replace British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. That leaves 6 lawmakers battling to lead the Conservative Party and the country. Former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt and Treasury Chief Nadhim Zahawi have failed to reach the threshold of 30 votes needed to stay in the contest. The 358 Tory legislators will vote again on Thursday, and if needed, further rounds of voting will take place next week until 2 candidates remain. The final 2 contenders will face a runoff vote by all Conservative Party members. The winner will automatically become Prime Minister without the need for a national election. A Tokyo court has ordered 4 former executives of the utility operating the tsunami-wrecked Fukushima nuclear power plant to pay 13 trillion yen to the company, holding them liable for the 2011 disaster. In the closely watched ruling, the Tokyo District Court said the former chairman of the Tokyo Electric Power Company Holdings and 3 other former executives failed to fulfill their duty to implement the utmost safety measures, despite knowing the risks of a serious accident if a major tsunami hit. It ruled they could have prevented the disaster if they had taken necessary steps sooner. Twitter is suing Tesla CEO Elon Musk to force him to complete the $44 billion acquisition of the social media company. Mr. Musk and Twitter have been bracing for a legal fight since the billionaire said Friday that he was backing off of his April agreement to buy the company. In the filing, Twitter accuses Mr. Musk of violating the merger agreement because the deal he signed no longer serves his personal interests. The World Economic Forum is now predicting it will take 132 years for the world to reach gender parity. This in terms of salaries, economic opportunity, education, health, and political empowerment. The Geneva-based think tank says the cost of living crisis, sparked in part by higher fuel and food prices, is expected to hit women the hardest. The forum says women have been disproportionately affected by this crisis following labor market losses during the pandemic and insufficient care infrastructure for children and the elderly. I'm Julie Stautland filling in for Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, visit our website at thenewsforum.ca and make sure to follow our social media handles on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also watch all our commentary, programming, and interviews on the Newsforum YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us on Forum Daily News, and we'll see you next time. Take care, Canada.